You're listening to Stories Behind the Songs with Chris Blair. For more information, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at SBTSongs or check us out at chrisblair.com. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Stories Behind the Songs. This week is a little different. First of all, if you guys have been listening to this podcast for a while, thank you. We appreciate the support. You've heard me say multiple times that Stories Behind the Songs, although we mostly talk to songwriters, I love to dive into all aspects of the music industry, and that is what we're doing this week. We've got Kris Rochester on the podcast this week, and we're going to dive into how he got his start in radio, built up his career all over the place with huge radio stations, and what that's like to be a pretty well-known DJ, and then how he shifted into artist management and used what he did in radio to make contacts into artist management, and what he's doing now, including managing a great artist by the name of Styles. We're going to dig into all of that and hear his story. Let's get to it. Here is Kris Rochester. All right, here we are back in Nashville. Kris Rochester in the house. Dude,
Hi.
I'm so excited for this one.
I'm excited and a little nervous. I'm not used to being on this side of interviews.
I know, man. Well, same. Like, I am sitting with a professional interviewer right now.
That's a good term to use, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, so, you know, we typically dive into the stories behind the songs, have a lot of songwriters, and I like expanding that. So I've been really pumped to just dive into radio, artist management, everything that you've done. Incredible career, by the way. So let's dive into that. Tony and Kris days. Like, how did you get into radio? And let's just kind of like walk through all the success.
Well, back in the day when radio was like almost celebrity status, I was 13 years old listening to two guys named Mark and Brian.
Okay.
They went to LA and became huge out in LA eventually. But, I was like, I can do that. And I started winning everything the radio station gave away. And one day they finally said, why do you win everything? And I said, because I want to work here. And the PD at the time happened to be in the lobby. And he goes, you get away down here after school every day. I'll teach you how to do it. That's how I got started.
Wow.
So I was 14 and hung around, washed cars, took out trash, whatever they asked me to do, I did. And just watched and learned until somebody didn't show up for work one night. And I was like, I can do it. So
wow,
that's how I got started. Then I met Tony, became friends with Tony. And we put a tape out, and Good Karma got us a job in San Diego. We were doing June Jam. Alabama used to do June Jam.
Okay, yeah.
And I got a call from a guy I knew in Georgia that said, hey, I've got a program director that doesn't know anybody. He just became program director of a country station. And he goes, he needs a place to stay. And I'm like, there's not a hotel within 100 miles of here. Just have him crash with us. At the end of it, the guy walks up and goes, do you guys have a tape of your show? He goes, I've really enjoyed hanging out with y'all. And I was like, no. And right then, our program director walked up and goes, here's a cassette of our CMA entry. It's mostly you guys. And I took it, handed it to him. He gave it to his consultant, who gave it to someone, and it ended up in San Diego. And then they came and said, you guys want to move to San Diego?
Man.
The guy was Dave Kelly, who works now, I think, Big Machine, maybe.
Okay, yeah.
So.
Man, that's incredible. So you make this move and you go to San Diego. So then what was it like in the beginning and like just like you guys just get thrown into this huge radio station?
Oh, it was at one time, I think R&R magazine going way back said it was the most competitive radio market in the country for mornings. So we were in the deep end.
Wow.
And just struggling. And then, you know, we were lucky enough to have great mentors and leaders. Mike Shepard, John Dimmick, Steve Reynolds, those guys took us under their wing and taught us. Like a lot of people, a lot of bosses, a lot of managers, they just go, do what I say. They don't teach you.
Right.
These guys really taught us what to do. So it really helped us. It really kind of helped me even in my life today.
Yeah. What are some of the most memorable interviews that you can remember?
Oh, my daughter asked that just a while back, and I'm like, well, I've interviewed a couple presidents. And she's like, no, not famous people, just fun interviews. And I'm like, it just depends on the day because, I mean, we've interviewed everybody. I seem to quote Kenny Rogers a lot.
Yeah.
He was kind of like a father figure to us almost because every time he'd come to town, we'd get to see him, and he always just had great advice and would say things that you're like, oh, and I use it all the time in my management. of artists is like, my favorite thing he always says is the three people thing. Everybody's three people. You're who you think you are, you're who they think you are, and you're who you really are. Closer you make all three of those, the better things go.
Man, I love that.
And he goes, I used to wear leather pants and my shirt unbuttoned. And he goes, that ain't me. And he goes, I'm a suit guy. And he goes, as soon as I put my suit on and started being me, things went well.
Yeah, that's so funny. I remember when I first got into music as an artist, I grew up not listening to country music a lot. And then Garth Brooks is really kind of like who switched me over. And I was like, oh man, this is like, I love this music. But it's funny you say that because back when I first had my band, I had the big belt buckle, the big cowboy hat, and I would get these like checkered shirts, you know, because I was just like, well, I guess this is what a country music star looks like. And it was the same thing. I would walk into and I'm like, this isn't me. So
that's where I learned one of my lessons too, is Gary Allen talking about the hats just made me think. I asked him one time, how did you decide on which label to sign with? Because everybody wanted them.
Yeah.
And he goes, I asked them all the same question. And I said, what was the question? He goes, what would you change about me if I signed today? And he goes, every label said, well, I'd get rid of the hat. I'd do this, I'd do that. He goes, my label, I think it was MCA, he goes, was the only one that said, we're not changing anything, we're signing you.
Love that.
Yeah. So it kind of goes along with the three people. Just be who you are.
Yeah. Okay. So you also, huge market in San Diego. And then you also worked huge market in Knoxville. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, like what were the differences between the two markets? Did you have to change the show a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, when we started in the 90s in San Diego, and we were out there for 15 years, then we came back here and got syndicated out of Nashville for years, and then 5 years in Knoxville. There's a 20-year gap. When I got into mornings in San Diego, at that time, skits and bits was the thing on the radio show. You know, you had to do the funny voices and the funny call-ins and the fake calls.
Right.
And then after O.J. Simpson, reality television took off and everybody wanted reality. And so it turned more into the morning show's life, like who's dating who or how's Tony's kids and then, you know, so now it turned into being more of a real person on the air. And then when we went to Knoxville, it was just, you know, radio has just shifted so much. The attention span of people is so short. It's like you don't get to do skits and bits anymore. And even when you're talking reality or your real life, it has to be so quick. It's a different world.
Yeah.
So, and even Knoxville is just a different area. East Tennessee is a different area.
Yeah.
But it was interesting.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful area.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I love it. I love it there. But I was just curious. I mean, I remember growing up listening to, all kinds of shows like that where, and it's interesting how much it's changed. And even, I think of like the people that are, big syndicated national shows now, like, I a lot of times turn that off because I just want to hear music.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing that a lot of radio stations that have trouble right now don't understand. And it's like, I not just East Tennessee, but even San Diego, when we were out there, that was a market where your radio station would have a 20 share in the ratings. And everybody's walking around going, well, yeah, we used to have 20 shares. We're just not doing what we used to do. And it's like, well, no, back then there was 4 radio stations. Each one had its own format. And that was your only thing you had to compete with in the car.
Yeah.
Now, my daughter couldn't tell you a radio station. She's got her earbuds in. The second she gets in the car, my wife listens to podcasts.
Yeah.
I sat behind a group of women at my daughter's gymnastics class, and I said, so what's the radio station in town? And that was here. And they just go, well, we don't really have time to listen to radio. And I'm like, really? But they told me all about the podcasts they were listening to. And I'm like, so you do have time. It's just not, because to your point, if they want to hear a song, they'll listen to it then.
Yeah.
It's like MTV. You see that meme every year, like MTV used to play music. They bring music back. Right. It's like, I'm not going to sit around for an hour to watch a video. I'm going to go Google it and watch it and then move on with my life.
Yeah. We put on CMT on Saturday mornings just because it is all music and videos, and got 3 kids and they love music, which makes me so happy. But other than that, like I can't imagine just like we're doing other things, right? We're just moving around the house and getting the day going, and it's just good to listen to music. And if you want to like look up and see a video, cool. but I wouldn't just sit in front of the TV like I did, as a young teenager watching MTV or something.
Yeah,
so,
MTV was, I've tried to explain to my daughter what that was like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't understand. I didn't have Wi-Fi. I didn't have anything. It was like, I got home from school and had MTV.
Yep.
And then would be angry. And the reason why I would watch it so long is I'd be worried what I would miss as soon as I turned it off.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to keep talking about radio a little bit, but I want to change. Like you had this phenomenal career in radio, and then you've switched over now into artist management and managing great guy Styles, a fantastic artist. How did that shift take place for you, and like, what were some of the challenges to leave after such a long career?
Well, before I went to Knoxville, Tony and I had talked about retiring and basically announced our retirement from radio because I love radio, so I'm not knocking it when I say this, but it's kind of like the new newspaper.
Yeah.
15 years ago, everybody was like, newspaper will always be here. And it's still technically around, but
is it?
Yeah. And radio's going that way. I mean, every year for the past 5-6 years, the major corporations do layoffs, mass layoffs every year. And there's not going to be a point where they go, we've hit it, we've peaked, now we're going to start hiring people back. It's just not going to happen. So I was like, I got to find another finish line. And I didn't know what I was really going to do. I was just kind of looking around thinking. And during COVID, my wife, who's a songwriter, Rachel.
Yep.
And she came up from a Zoom write and went, I just wrote with a guy that I haven't felt this way about anybody since the first time I wrote with Luke Bryan. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, he's just got it. She's like, he's rough. But she goes, but he's something. And then I didn't think anything else about it. And then like a month or two later, she's like, I think he's getting some bad advice. Would you talk to him? And I'm like, well, I don't know what I could do. And he and I became friends and started talking. And I basically stole everything I learned from Steve Reynolds in radio about how to work through things and figure out the end goal. And then I went around town to all my relationships I'd built for years with Clarence Spalding, who's made $1 or $2 in the business of management, and Irv at the time, and Keith Gale and Enzo. And I talked to them and they were all like, you should do it. And I'm like, I don't know how to manage. And every one of them were like, call me, any problems, questions, I'll help you. And I went back and told Styles I couldn't find him a manager. And then one day Styles just goes, look, you're my manager. This is stupid. Let's move on.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up getting into that.
Wow.
So,
yeah, I heard a funny story that when you were first critiquing songs.
Oh, you talking about Rachel?
That you were told by and everybody listening, Rachel Thibodeau, amazing songwriter. That is who we're talking about. Tell us that story.
Before I say anything about Rachel, I want to say she's an amazing wife and I love her more than anything.
Yes.
That way, if I say anything stupid, I can say, oh, no, remember I said I loved you. When we started dating, Kris Young actually introduced us at Tin Roof. And she hates people that go to Tin Roof. I mean, not hates people, but she hates Tin Roof, the bar scene. But she ended up after a write one day over there, and I ended up over there, and we kind of hit it off. And so when we started dating, our dates would sometimes end up being just sitting at the bar or at my place, drinking wine and playing songs back and forth for each other. Because I went through a minute where I thought I was a songwriter. And she played a song one day and I went, good luck getting that recorded. And she goes, well, Martina cut it. And I'm like, oh, Martina McBride? And she goes, yeah. And I said, oh, wow. Shows you what I know. And about a month later, we were at a store and that song comes on. And I'm like, there's that song that I couldn't believe got recorded by Martina. And she goes, Reba. And I said, no, you said Martina cut it. And she goes, no, they both cut it. So it shows you my ability to pick songs.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's never going to get recorded. Just Martina and Reba. Other than that, nobody wanted it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've said this so many times, but it's like, it's funny. Like, and that's one of the things I love about music is it's so subjective. I mean, one person can hear a song and go, we talked offline before this, and we won't get into that story, but about, huge artists that someone at the label was like, no, this isn't the hit.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a massive hit. And, it's just like whoever is listening at the time.
There's a song that Styles and Dave Turnbull wrote that I have put on my back, and they wrote it 4 or 5 years ago, but I have pitched it to everybody because in my head, I'm like, this is a number 1 smash.
Yeah.
And somewhere, some way, I'm going to get that cut someday. But yeah, it's just.
And it probably will be.
Yeah.
And it'll become this huge hit. So, let's dive into the artist management a little bit, because I think there's so many people that listen to this podcast who are aspiring, up and coming songwriter artists that are just lost. They don't know what to do. And kind of tying into this, that's one of the reasons I was so excited about having you on, Kris, is that that what you talked about with radio, back when I first moved here over 20 years ago, even then it was like, you had to have this big A&R team. You had to have a label deal. You had, all of these things. And now with Spotify, Apple Music, Instagram, TikTok, all these things, you have the launch of these careers sometimes where, they're all independent, but then at the same time, there's no management, there's no focus. So I think it's brilliant how you've taken everything you learned in radio and being able to meet and become friends with all of these artists over the years, and now doing what you're doing. So let's dive into that a little bit, and maybe just talk about what is a day in the life, and all of the things that you do for Styles and everybody that you work with.
Well, I mean, every artist and every manager's relationship is going to be different.
Sure.
I mean, it's just you never know what one person's going to be like, and, what they have to deal with and where they're at in their careers. I've discovered there's a niche out there. There's a lot of songwriters and artists, like you said, that are lost, that don't need a manager. They think they need a manager, but what they need is just some guidance.
Yeah.
Because Styles needed a manager because he's at that point to where it was like he's this close I always say he's 3 minutes away. Once that one song hits, we're off to the races. And it's those people like Styles. A typical day for me is I'll get up. I usually get on the phone with Styles immediately. We go over his day of who he's writing with. And then I'll get with Keith Gale over at Good Company where he's signed with. And we just make sure we have a plan, and we're just every day's executing it. I go through shows that people are offering. He gets a lot of private shows because of his hunting.
Yeah.
It's amazing the amount of Moultrie, Mossy Oak people out there that are always like, hey, would he want to do it? Yes, he would. If it involves hunting and shows, he's in.
Yeah.
But, you just deal with all that behind the scenes stuff. And then at the same time, we try to make sure our strategies are the same to cut through the noise. Cause there's, 10,000 songs a day or whatever going up.
Yeah.
And you have to come up with ideas to cut through the noise. And like you said, back in the day, it was big A&R groups. Now I could put out an album this afternoon.
Yeah.
It won't have anybody listen to it, but I could have it out there cluttering up space.
Yeah. So, I mean, even with that, what are the biggest challenges that you have to deal with because of all the noise?
It's funny. I just had this conversation with Clarence Spalding about a month ago. Artist interference is a big thing. Styles and I really have to keep our blinders on because I consult 3 other artists, and every one of them are dealing with it. It's people that really, they say they're looking out for the artist, but all they do is cause division. And they say stupid stuff like, you should be opening for Morgan Wallen. No, good tip, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know what's all involved in that. But then you have to talk to your artist and go, well, I mean, we can try to do that, but here's the way to do that. Luckily, Styles gets that. I don't have to do that, but I got a friend of mine that manages an artist that he's putting his head through a wall because it's every day they see a concert poster. Hey, get me on that show because my friend said I need to be on that tour. And so artist interference is probably the biggest thing. And it's usually a family member, somebody, or a friend, another songwriter, somebody that has nothing to do with any of it.
Yeah.
That's always in their ear going, oh, you should be doing this. And I wouldn't do that. I'd do this.
Man, yeah, I worked with somebody a couple years ago, but like, brilliant talent, had so much going on, but it was the same kind of thing. Like it was, hey, I want to go out on tour, and this is the kind of tour bus that I want. And I was like, we have a lot of steps to get to before that. Like, you know, you're going to be in a SUV or a van pulling a trailer, and you are the road person, you know, like, and it was just like breaking through that. Like it was so frustrating and heartbreaking because this person could have been huge.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I've seen so many people throw the careers away. Kenny Chesney, name drop for you, told me one time, he goes, so many people think the minute they have some success or get a record deal that they can go, made it.
Yeah.
Now make me famous. And he goes, that's really when the work starts.
That's when it starts. Yeah.
So it's, you know, that's the cool thing about styles. Now, a couple of the people I consult, I'm like, you've got to understand, you know, it doesn't go that way. It's just what you said. I want a tour bus and I want, you know, 15,000 a show. And it's like, no hits, no ticket history.
Yeah.
Why would somebody give you that much money? It's because I'm really good. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And they may be, but nobody knows that yet.
Yep.
So it's just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Sennheiser microphones. When we first started this podcast, we were using some older microphones, and Sennheiser came in and sponsored us and gave us some MK4s and 914s. And I mean, I'm telling you, it's made all of the difference in the world. We love these microphones. We use them at the listening room as well. And I just can't say enough great things about them. Go check out Sennheiser.com. If you are into music in any way, their microphones are hands down the best on the planet. Go check them out, Sennheiser.com. And thank you, Sennheiser, for the support and the sponsorship. We love y'all. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you think make you different?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, the radio history,
sure,
I think is different because I've met several managers. I mean, there's the managers I've already listed today that I love, and they've been in this their whole life. But then there's managers now I see that I think are more pencil and paper people. You know, like I'll book the shows, you go do it, and they kind of leave them out on their own. And I remember from radio doing a morning show, being thrown in a room with no clock, no format clock, no plan, and being lost. And being told, appeal to women 25-54. And being a 22-year-old kid going, okay. And then I remember being taught and someone going, okay, let's have a strategy together and talk through it and work. And that's what I'm really trying to do to make me different.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I think I'm willing to have tough conversations. There's a lot of people in this town, I think, run from tough conversations.
Yeah.
And I'm not scared to have those.
Yeah.
I mean, it stinks, but I'm willing to sit down and go, look, this is why this isn't going to work or isn't working. We need to shift to this or this. And a lot of people will dodge that stuff.
Man, I think that's so key. I mean, we deal with it here at the listening room too. When we get, you know, I mean, there's so many people that send emails and songs and whatever that want to play here. And it's, you know, it's hard to have those conversations when it's like, well, you're not there yet, you know, or whatever it might be. Like, it's easy just to respond to the ones that are good and be like, yeah, I'd love to get you a date. And then just ignore the other ones. It's those hard conversations. Like, you have to do that. And it's good for them too. So, I mean, I think, I applaud you for doing that, because I have seen so many people, like you said, not be able to have those conversations. And I think that's when you look at what an artist management, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that I look at that is like, your job is to advise and help advance the career, but you work for the artist. So yes. Like if that's all you can do, like, hey, and give good feedback on, hey, I think this song over that song, or we should do this gig, we should not do this gig, there's no ROI, or whatever it might be. And then at the end of the day, if the artist is like, hey, this is what I want to do, great. Support it, figure out the best way to make that happen, right?
I've always told Styles, it's kind of like the president. I serve at the leisure of the president.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you, hey, this is what I would do. Here's the reason why I think this will work. Here's why I think that won't work. But ultimately, you make the call.
Yeah.
And I'll get on board and we'll make it work, whatever you choose.
Yeah.
And we've had a great relationship with that, but it's true. I mean, I always used to talk about the old school TV shows, you know, Seinfeld or something. You know, there was 2 shows. That's a good example of old people here. Seinfeld and Sybil Shepherd had 2 shows come out at the same time. And Seinfeld said, I want to hire the best actors I can and put them around me. And they did it. And then Sybil, they hired some good actors and they outshined her and got Emmys, and she fired them all. Because she wanted to be surrounded by people that made her feel good about herself. And her show, nobody talks about. And then Seinfeld's an iconic, historic show. But he was able just to be himself and have tough conversations with people and say, this is what I want, and we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And he didn't mind he wasn't the star. I mean, his name's on it.
Yeah.
But Michael Richards and, you know, everybody else stole the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Let's go back to one of the questions that's come up with a lot of up and coming artists that have been on this stage. What I'd love to know your take on you know, putting out songs. You mentioned a while ago, you know, you could put an album out today if you wanted to. It's so easy to go to a DSP and just drop a song, a single, or a full album or whatever. Especially from a guy like you that's got all of this history in radio and knows how these algorithms and things work. What is your take on should someone put out a song every 6 weeks? Is it just to keep that going? Does it matter? Like,
you know, it's the Wild West. I was on the phone discussing that again this morning. It's some people, you know, drop the whole album. I mean, I think if you get to a point like Morgan Wallen and Taylor Swift realize if we drop the whole album, our fans are going to stream it 50 times tonight and we're going to get streams on every one of those songs.
Sure.
And then you kind of see which one separates. But I mean, I think it's good to be consistent out there because the world is just moving so fast. I think if every 6 weeks you got a new song, it's just radio's problem is they're too slow. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the number 1 song this week's been out 60 something weeks, I think. And it's, I mean, they've dropped 4 or 5 other songs in the time that it took to get that one up, which means those songs will never be singles because it would be 2027 by the time it got to the top of the charts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's crazy to think about it like that. Do you, I mean, and again, I'm talking more of like, not a Morgan Wallen, you know, those guys.
You're talking about like Styles or someone like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, just I like releasing music ever so often, but Styles is to a point now to where every year he's going to release God's Grocery Store is his brand.
Yep.
Because he's a hunter. He's a real outdoorsman, God's Grocery Store. And he's got aisle 1 is out now. And then every hunting season, he's going to drop a new aisle.
Yep.
Aisle 2 will be coming later this year. And it's going to have features on them and everything. So that's his thing every year he knows he's doing. But we're free the rest of the year. If he wants to do 6-pack of songs, we can do them every 6 weeks. We can drop an album all at once. You know, we've discussed all those things. So
yeah,
it's just I mean, again, it's the Wild West. And I don't think one thing works better over the other.
Yeah. Yeah,
I really
think
don't.
That's what it's like. It's a good thing because it's so easy, but it's also like all the noise again. Like it's you know, I've also had you know, huge agents that are friends in town, you know, and that have said that the consistency does matter, but also like the quality does not. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Like, I don't like that.
No, it's like, and I think like. I think what they meant is like, don't let it suck, right? Like you shouldn't put out a bad song or like a bad demo or whatever. But the comment has been made of like, look, be consistent, put songs out every 6 weeks. It doesn't matter if it's a $10,000 studio, great producer, anything like that. If it's a good demo that it costs you $500, like put it out. And it's I don't know.
I don't know how I feel about that either. I would prefer, but again, it's so inundated right now. If you've got to stay visible.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have to be each artist would have to pick that on their own.
Yeah.
And if they can do it consistently. I mean, $500 every 6 weeks is a lot of money to some of these artists that are out waiting tables and stuff too during the day.
Yeah.
So,
let's go back to, I want to hear some good stories. I know you've got some great stories over the years.
it depends what you're talking about. Like, you want good stories, bad stories, backstage stories, just
like the stories. Think about like, the stories that don't get told that often, like something that you can tell us, whether it's like a crazy story, a funny story, or whatever, just through the years. Like you've worked with so many brilliant artists, and you mentioned presidents, and just, I'm just so curious to dive into that world and just hear some of those.
I'll tell you one that I love, and it's not a big secret. It's not a big funny payoff on it or anything, but years ago at CRS, when CRS was rocking, Leanne Womack had a suite going at CRS, and there's 50 people in the room, and she's singing. And when she got done, she goes, "I'm going to take a break, but I want you guys to listen to my guitar player. Please listen to him sing." And this is a little pudgy kid, clean shaven. 90% of the room gets up and walks right out. Like, Leanne left. The star left. I don't want to be in a room. There's no stars in here. And the guy sang, and the 8 of us that stayed were like, oh my gosh. It was Kris Stapleton.
Oh my gosh, dude.
And now you look back and you're like, I get to say I sat in a room with 8 people and listened to Kris Stapleton sing 2 or 3 songs.
Man,
and
I love that.
But there's DJs walking around right now somewhere in the country having no idea that they sat in a room with Kris Stapleton thinking like, man, I got to figure out how to see him in concert when he comes.
Wow. That's amazing.
So that kind of stuff. I've got millions of those things.
Yeah. What would you say one of the craziest stories? And if you need to leave names out, but just like, what's one of the craziest things that you've been able to experience?
Oh gosh, you put me on the spot with that. I'm trying to think of. There's been some where police have been involved. I met one artist that the first thing he ever said to me was he walked across a room and said, "You're the guy in San Diego, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Can you get me some pills snuck across the border if I send you down there?" And I'm just like, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. Thanks, though. But I'm sitting there thinking, dude, yeah, I could have went on the air the next day.
Yeah.
And said that. You have no idea. And I mean, I've been with some artists that were, immediately like, "Hey, I need you to do me a favor." And I'm like, "Okay, what do you need?" And it's like, "Yeah, your receptionist, I need you to get her my number, have her meet me in my room if she would, da-da-da-da. And then my wife will be here. So I need to make sure." And I'm just like,
wow.
Craziness, those kind of stupid stories. And then there's great stories you hear of, artists that fly in early and what do you need and helping out and, it's just fun stuff.
Yeah.
Being good to people, swinging by charities, that sort of stuff.
What would you say, like something like Stapleton, like sitting in a room before they're huge? Like, do you have any stories of like a great story like that of someone that was very up and coming, but enough to the point where they were doing radio tour, right? Mm-hmm. That was someone that was like very, very open, very nice. And then, had this huge, like maybe somebody that's become like this iconic name that everybody knows, but still is like that person.
Absolutely. We used to do a Tony and Kris golf tournament every year.
Okay.
When the ACMs were in LA.
Yeah.
And so all the artists would come down and play in the tournament. One year, our dinner, for $50, you got to play golf and then have a dinner for St. Jude. Our stage was Rascal Flatts, Keith Urban, Tracy Byrd, Brad Paisley, Montgomery Gentry.
You couldn't get anybody good?
Yeah, I was like, think of that lineup, like how much that would cost.
Yeah.
And, but anyhow, the first year that Paisley and Urban hit, I think But for the Grace of God had just come out.
Yeah.
And, they played, and we had a New Faces stage, and we had the headliner stage, and we put both Brad and Keith on the headliner stage. And I remember Keith going, "We don't need to be on the headliner. We haven't had a hit yet, really." And it's like, get up on the stage. And they came back every year for like 3 or 4 years. But Keith was amazing every year, always nice. I mean, they all were nice, but Keith was so nice. And I remember thinking like, this is amazing. And we were begging people to go see him opening up for people. And, you know, nobody ever shows up for the openers.
Yeah.
And then the next year they're calling us going, what can we do to get tickets? And it's like, I begged for you to go last year. But I just text Keith Urban a week ago about, Rachel had a question about something, and I shot him a text. And to this day, he usually hits me back within an hour every time.
Yeah.
And I can't offer him anything right now. I can't offer him airplay or anything. It's just, he's just a good guy.
Yeah.
Dirk Bentley's the same way. If I ever text him, you know, when I met him, they're still the same.
Yeah.
So
I love that, man. I've had so many similar experiences through music and especially the listening room where, you know, before I even moved here and had a band that was covering, you know, these people that I looked up to from the 90s. And then I met them and, you know, to this day, they're like great friends, you know, and then I've had some on the opposite side too.
I will tell you, there's a million years ago, this one artist flew in, had one hit, shot straight to the top, and then became the biggest jerk on the face of the earth and lost his deal, everything. And the next CRS, Country Radio Seminar, I was sitting at the Bridge Bar, and he walked in with a full fur coat, big giant hat, and he walked up to me and he recognized it's from our golf tournament. And he goes, hits me on the shoulder and goes, hey, go buy me a drink. And I went, excuse me?
Wow.
And he goes, hey, it's me. Go buy me a drink. And I went, why? And he goes, you know who I am? And I said, yeah, we both have the same record deal and you got one more hit than I got. And he flipped me off and walked out.
Wow.
I've never seen him since.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy, man. Dude, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
I love hearing these stories. I could sit here all day and just go back and forth.
I hope
man.
that this was good.
Yeah. Yeah. I've really loved it. Do you, like what's next for you?
To break styles through.
Yeah.
That is my one. I mean, I've had a couple of people ask me to manage them and I'm like, I'll consult because that's, you know, one day a week I can focus on that.
Yeah.
So Styles is a full-time wrestle to the ground because he's got his ADHD, but he's so close and he's so good. So my number one goal right now is to push him on through and just try to be a good husband, make Rach not kick me out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we love having her here as well.
I love this place. This is a great
Thank you.
venue. I encourage everyone that's visiting Nashville to come here because it's there's a lot of riffraff around.
Yeah.
This is a good quality place. And you guys are so good to songwriters.
Thank you.
I mean, really good to songwriters.
Thanks. Means a lot.
Appreciate you.
And by the way, everybody out there listening, go back. We did a great episode with Styles, so go check that out and dive into if you haven't heard it already. It was a great episode to dive into his stories behind the songs and hear everything that's going on. Kris, I always end on this question.
Okay.
With everything that you've done in radio and now artist management, if you go back to 8-year-old Kris, what advice would you give yourself today?
I was invited to sit with Waylon Jennings for an hour on a bus that was 5 minutes from my house. And I said, I haven't taken my nap yet.
No.
And I would tell my 8-year-old self, get off the couch and go sit with Waylon on that bus and listen to him.
Man. Yeah.
That's my biggest regret on anything so far. Is like, everybody be like, did you ever meet Waylon? I'm like, nah. And I was like, he was 1.5 miles from my house on his tour bus telling stories to a bunch of people on a TV set.
Man.
And I missed it. So that's my big advice.
All right. I love it. Well, thank you so much. And we will, we'll put liner notes to, to Styles in your, so that everybody can easily, if you don't want to go back and find that episode with Styles, although I encourage you to do that. We'll put links to all of his music, and man, I think it truly, it's just a matter of time. He is so great, and
he is amazing.
And you obviously have a lot of fantastic connections, and he's in good company with you, and we're just I know it's just a matter of time, and you're gonna break him.
I hope so.
Yeah, man.
See you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening. This has been another episode of Stories Behind the Songs. I am Kris Blair. You've been listening to Kris Rochester, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Stories Behind the Songs with Kris Blair. Make sure to give us a follow on Spotify if you enjoyed this episode, and make sure you click that notification button so you can keep notified when new episodes come out. We release brand new episodes every Tuesday, and you can find us on YouTube at Stories Behind the Songs with Kris Blair or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to send us a comment letting us know what you thought of the episodes. We love getting your feedback, and share this with your friends. The more we grow, the more that we can keep doing this. It's our mission to bring you all of these great stories behind the songs from some of Nashville's most iconic artists and songwriters, publishers, producers, everyone in between, and a lot of my great friends. We love what we do, and we love sharing their stories with you. We appreciate all of the continued support. Thanks also to all of our sponsors, and we will see you all next week.